Chapter 8:13. The hostess pushed a huge painting rack over. It was covered with a piece of cloth, which made it look a little mysterious. Su Mo was in high spirits after Shen Lian stepped down from the stage. It was rare for a noble man like Tang Yu to be approachable, so she was naturally in a good mood. She interacted with Tang Yu, and the male host seemed to have nothing to do with her. Su Mo tilted her head and smiled. "Can I ask Mr. Tang, this painting is a character?" Tang Yu smiled. Su Mo had seen her fair share of handsome men in the fashion industry, and some of them put in a lot of effort to get on her good side in order to get resources from her. To be honest, she had slept with quite a few of them, but none of them were as exciting as when she was with old Kansas. However, Su Mo, who was used to seeing handsome men, couldn't take her eyes off Tang Yu. Her heart was thumping. If old Kan was suitable for sweating and hand-to-hand combat, then Tang Yu was the kind of Prince Charming that she admired. Every woman had a young girl's dream, and Su Mo was no exception. Moreover, it was less likely for a woman to have such a young girl's dream when she was older. Su Mo snapped back to her senses. "Can I take it off?" Tang Yu smiled. "Of course." He walked up and grabbed a corner of the cloth with his slender fingers before pulling it off. The oil painting, which was 60 by 80 in size, appeared out of thin air. Everyone gasped in surprise. It was a painting of a young girl, but only her back was visible. In the bright kitchen, sunlight shone in through the windows. A beautiful figure stood in front of the kitchen counter. She was probably making breakfast. Her long black hair was casually clipped with a clip, and she was wearing a long white t-shirt. Her slender and straight legs were extremely beautiful. She tilted her head slightly, and only her long eyelashes and plump lips could be seen. However, it was enough to make people fall in love at first sight. The quality of the painting gave people a sense of warmth. Although it was a painting with a woman as the main character, it didn't make people focus on how beautiful the girl was. Although a girl who could make Tang Yu fall in love with her was definitely a beauty, instead, it made people feel the warmth in the artist's heart, and it created a calm and peaceful state of mind. Su Mo could tell at a glance that the girl in the picture was the one old Kan brought over. She could tell at a glance from her well-proportioned frame. She glanced at Pei Chi-Chi, and saw that she was also a little shocked. She must have noticed it too. What a good show. Shen Lian had been slapped in the face. Although Su Mo could tell, she knew how to put on a show. This must be President Shin. I didn't expect President Shin to be so virtuous. Actually, how could it be Shen Lian? One of Shen Lian's legs was already crippled. It was impossible for her to be barefooted. Even if she wore shoes, she would still need to wear socks. In the painting, she was barefooted, and each foot was delicate and moving. Su Mo couldn't understand why Tang Yu would donate a painting like this when he had such deep feelings for her. Wouldn't it be better to keep it at home and admire it? Even though she had her doubts, she still teased Tang Yu. "Mr. Tang, you can't bid for it later. If you want to get back Mr. Shin's painting, you have to show your love to the children in the mountainous area." Shen Lian's face was as cold as ice. She had no words to express her anger. "That painting was of Pei Chi-Chi." Su Mo spoke up. Shen Lian's face was cold as she said word by word, "Of course, I will definitely show my love." She wanted to continue shouting, but her position in Jin Taihe was not stable yet because Shen Zhongshan was not dead. If she continued to spend money willfully, the old man on the board would not let her off. So, no matter how unwilling she was, she gave up. Su Mo was laughing so hard that she couldn't close her legs. She walked over to Qin Anlin and placed the microphone by his lips. She said gently, "Our CEO Qin is really caring towards the children in the mountainous areas. I thank President Qin on their behalf. Chapter 8:15. Then, Qin Anlin changed the topic. This painting looks like a girl I like, so I'm giving it to her. The crowd was in an uproar. Tang Yu was the one confessing his love for his fiancée. How did it turn into President Qin snatching his love away? Qin Anlin looked at Su Mo. Can you give me a light? Su Mo walked over and whispered into Qin Anlin's ear. Su Mo was a little surprised. She looked at Tang Yu and nodded. The light swept across the crowd and finally landed on Pei Chi. If she had a choice, Pei Chi would rather find a hole and hide in it. She was only there to take a few photos. How did she become the female lead? Please describe the psychological trauma Shen Lian is feeling. Qin Anlin quickly wrote a check and handed it to Su Mo. Then, he took the painting and walked towards Pei Chi. The crowd automatically dispersed and formed a long path. The lights chased after him. At this moment, no one knew what was wrong with the band, but they actually played a famous love song. The crowd was in an uproar. Someone started clapping and shouting, "Propose! Propose! Propose!" Pei Chi stood there. She couldn't avoid it. Old Can's voice rang in her ears. This guy is really brave. He knew that he would be rejected, but he still dared to do it. In the blink of an eye, Qin Anlin walked to Pei Chi's side. He looked at her deeply and smiled. Pei Chi, this is for you. Pei Chi's gaze landed on his face. Qin Anlin kept looking at her. They only had the memory of that night. If something had happened between them that night, perhaps Tang Yu would not be involved now. But perhaps he would not be involved anymore. Qin Anlin was a little regretful, but he was glad at the same time. After a long time, Pei Chi chuckled and said, "President Qin, you may have mistaken me for someone else. It's not me up there. But in my heart, she is you." Qin Anlin's gaze was indifferent. He had never been an emotional person, but when he saw her again, he was sure that he wanted her. Not only did he possess her physically, but he also owned her completely. Qin Anlin smiled. Pei Chi, you don't need to feel burdened. You just need to accept it. Pei Chi lowered her eyes. 100 million. He raised his eyes to look at the painting, and his gaze unexpectedly met Tang Yu's. Before she could reply, Old Can had already picked it up. This painting is so expensive. We have to treat it well when we get back. Pei Chi's feelings were destroyed by Lao Can. She wasn't his ancestor, did he need to worship her? But since Lao Can had already accepted it, it would be pretentious to push it back. Pei Chi thanked him softly. Qin Anlin looked at her deeply and did not say anything else. Just as the two of them looked at each other and were speechless, Shen Lian's voice rang out. "Miss Pei, since you've obtained such a painting, shouldn't you also give some love to the children in the disaster area?" Her words were clearly making things difficult for Su Mo. Pei Chi raised her eyes and looked at her. She could see that Su Mo's eyes were filled with malice. She felt a headache coming on. Given Pei Chi's current situation, it was impossible for her to donate anything decent. Pei Chi smiled when she saw the smugness in Shen Lian's eyes. She raised her head and looked at Qin Anlin. "President Qin, are you willing to spend 10 million to dance with me?" Qin Anlin smiled. "Of course." Pei Chi held his arm and slowly walked to the center of the stage. Chapter 8:16. Pei Huan came over and leaned against Lao Kansas. She said in an awkward voice, "Do you know that I slept with President Qin?" "President Qin slept with you, didn't he?" Lao Can didn't give her any face. Girls should have some dignity. "They slept all day long." didn't they feel ashamed? Below the stage, Shunlian was so angry that her whole body was trembling. Pei Chi-Chi. Pei Chi-Chi held Qin Anlan's arm and slowly walked onto the stage. She was wearing a silver dress, and Qin Anlan was wearing black. Her slender figure made him look taller and slender. The music started, and she bloomed in his arms, like an orchid in the dark night. At this moment, Qin Anlan was doomed. Tang Yu watched quietly from below the stage. Everything was under his control, but he still felt pain in his heart. He still cared that she was in someone else's arms. Shunlian raised her chin and said, "Is this what you want? To help your ex-wife find another man?" She smiled coldly. "You're really a competent brother and ex-husband." Tang Yu looked straight at the stage, and after a long time, he said calmly, "Isn't it what you want to see them together?" Shunlian had mixed feelings. Maybe it was. If Pei Chi-Chi and Qin Anlan were together, she would not be able to pester Tang Yu anymore. However, was Tang Yu willing to do that? She doubted it. But at this time, she wanted to stab Tang Yu. Only then could she calm down. Pei Chi-Chi has so many men around her, her so-called master, Qin Anlan, and even Lin Jinrong. Shunlian's face showed a touch of certainty. "Tang Yu, no matter how unwilling you are, Pei Chi-Chi hates you so much. She will be with someone else sooner or later." On the other hand, Tang Yu's face was very calm. As he watched the two dancing on the stage, his gaze became even more unfathomable. Yes, this was the result he wanted. He had never cared about Qin Anlan. What he cared about was Jinrong, and Qin Anlan was a very good stumbling block. Even if he felt uncomfortable in his heart, it was more reassuring than being with Jinrong. This night was destined to be a night of heartbreak. Against his will, he pushed Pei Chi-Chi to Qin Anlan's side to keep Jinrong in check. Perhaps he needed Qin Anlan to protect Chi-Chi when he was not around. Her safety was more important than being with him. Tang Yu did not continue watching. He quietly left the venue, walked to the smoking area outside, and smoked alone. Shunlian approached quietly. In the smoke, her beautiful eyes were filled with sadness. "Tang Yu, why can't you forget her?" Tang Yu was still leaning against the wall, and he smiled lightly. "Sometimes, I'd rather forget her myself." In that case, he could let go and let Chi-Chi be happy, instead of forcing her to wait for him like this. He knew that the waiting was hard. He did not want her to suffer, but he could not let it go. No matter how hard it was, how difficult it was, no matter what, he had to wait. Shunlian did not understand feelings. What she wanted was to possess something. To possess something that did not belong to her. No one could save her, including herself. As he said this, Shunlian smiled gently. Her smile was strange. "Tang Yu, that's great. We are the same now." She said word by word, the same pain, the same no future, and the endless waiting. Tang Yu did not look at her. He put out the cigarette, and disappeared at the end of the aisle. Tears blurred Shunlian's eyes. Chapter 8:17. It wasn't that she hadn't seduced him before, or even drugged him. But, he had always used that cold gaze to tell her that he didn't want her. Shunlian stood under the chandelier. Her shadow was very long, and she looked very lonely. After Pei Chi-Chi and Qin Anlan had finished their dance, the charity ball was also over. She turned around to look for Lao Can, but he had already disappeared. She noticed that Pei Huan had disappeared together with him. Pei Chi-Chi sighed. Pei Huan really didn't want to give up. The main reason why she didn't agree was that Lao Can was 38 years old this year, 16 years older than Pei Huan, and he was a playboy, even though Pei Huan was not a decent person. She stood in the atrium of the hotel and dialed Lao Can's cell phone, but no one picked up for a long time. Pei Chi was a little annoyed. She dialed again, but there was still no answer. At this moment, she heard a faint voice. Chi. She looked up in confusion at the car that had stopped in front of her. The car window rolled down slowly, and Tang Yu's face appeared in front of her. He sat in the car and looked ahead. Get in. Pei Chi took a step back. There were steps behind her, and she almost fell. She was supported by a pair of hands. She looked sideways and saw that it was Qin Anlin. Qin Anlin helped Pei Chi stand up straight and smiled. I'll take you back. Pei Chi wanted to reject him, but she turned around to look at Tang Yu. He sat in the car and looked at her with a burning gaze. She lowered her eyes and said to Qin Anlin, okay. Even though he knew that he was being used, Qin Anlin was willing to do it. My car is over there. Pei Chi nodded and followed him. Tang Yu's car was right in front of them. Qin Anlin suddenly paused. He took off his jacket and placed it on her shoulders. She was stunned for a moment and looked at the clothes she was wearing. Chi, it's cold at night. Qin Anlin puts one hand in his trouser pocket and smiles gently in the strong night wind. She did not make a sound, nor did she refuse. Tang Yu got out of the car, put his hand on the door, and called her name. Pei Chi. Don't go with him. His voice was stern, but Pei Chi was absent-minded. He was Shen Lian's fiancé. Why was he still pestering her now? Moreover, she was his biological sister. Pei Chi's eyes were glistening with tears, which were moving under the moonlight. Qin Anlin stretched out his hand. Let's go. Tang Yu's heart was heaving up and down, and his gaze was stern. Under his gaze, Pei Chi's hand was held by Qin Anlin. When that soft hand was held in his palm, he decided not to let go, whether she was against her will or not. The night wind was strong, and a handsome young man stood beside the car, his fingers clenched into a fist. Qin Anlin sent Pei Chi to the back seat, closed the car door, and met Tang Yu's eyes. He smiled faintly and got into the car. Soon, the car slid into the driveway and disappeared into the traffic. Tang Yu squinted and looked at her for a while. All these were within his expectations, but her reaction and her choice still hurt his eyes and his heart. Yes, why would she listen to him? Why would she be willing to be with her brother? It was not that he did not understand what Lin Yun said that day. Time was the cruelest, and it was enough to change everything. And he, in order not to let Shen Lian suspect, couldn't stop Jinrong and Qin Anlin from getting close to her, and even let her live with that old man. He gave her freedom and kept her safe. As long as he could see her, he would be happy to see her happy, but he would not be happy to see her too happy. He was afraid that she would forget him, afraid that she would never come back. Chapter 8:18. Qin Anlin's car arrived at the condominium and Pei Chi said coldly, "Stop the car." He stopped the car but did not let her get out. The car door was locked and she could not get out. Qin Anlin's long fingers stroked the steering wheel gently and his voice was soft. You threw me away after using me. Pei Chi, is that so? She sat in the back seat and said coldly, You knew that you were using President Qin but you were still willing. Why are you blaming others now? He chuckled. Pei Chi, my help always comes with a price. He was so domineering and charming, but Pei Chi was no longer the Pei Chi of the past. She had been with Old Can for a long time and had become thicker. Using Old Can's words, there's no such thing as owing or owing. It's voluntary. What do I owe? Pei Chi leaned against the back seat lazily and met Qin Anlin's gaze in the rearview mirror. The neon lights of the street were in the background. The stars made the young man's eyes look like they were dyed with fireworks. He did not speak and only stared at her. After a long time, Qin Anlin said, I heard that Lin Jinrong wants to be with you. Pei Chi, have you considered it? She looked at his eyes for a while and smiled. It has nothing to do with you. Qin Anlin stretched his hand out of the window and closed the rear-view mirror. After that, he turned his body and looked straight into her eyes. He said slowly, Pei Chi, I've confessed. Pei Chi supported her sharp chin with her slender arm. Do I have to accept President Qin's confession? He just looked at her. Don't forget, I was married, and I had an abortion. Chi smiled, but there was a hint of sadness in her eyes that was hard to detect. Qin Anlin's handsome face rested on the back of the seat, which made him look a little childish. He smiled. Even Lin Jinrong doesn't care, so why should I? Pei Chi had no choice. Qin Anlin, there are so many women in your company. Why do you have to pester me like this? Is it fun? His gaze was pure and kind. I'll answer you only after I've played with you. Then, he added, I'm not playing around. How about this, Pei Chi, how about we play with each other? Boring. Pei Chi patted the car door and said, let me out. He looked at her crazed expression and his gaze changed from pure to dangerous. Pei Chi, is my car that easy to sit in? With that said, he reached out to hold her little chin and narrowed his eyes. Shouldn't there be some fare? Pei Chi slapped his hand away, took out 200 yuan from her purse, and threw it to him. Is it enough? Qin Anlin was thrown all over his face, 2 pieces of Grandpa Mao fell from his handsome face. He reached out to grab her hand, but Pei Chi escaped. In the dark car, Qin Anlin looked at her and said in a seductive voice, Are you afraid? What am I afraid of? Pei Chi laughed coldly. Qin Anlin, stop your tricks. I'm not one of those small-time celebrities in your company. I'm not someone you can buy with 500,000 yuan. This time, he successfully grabbed her hand and dragged her to the back of his seat. Their faces were facing each other and their bodies were only separated by the back of the seat. His eyes were clear and bright as he looked at her. King Entertainment and Qin Anlin, is that enough? Lunatic. Pei Chi bit her lip and glared at him. Everything had changed. After a long while, Qin Anlin got out of the car first. He walked to the back seat and held the car door for her to get out. When she stood on the ground, Qin Anlin helped her and said in a low voice, Think about it carefully. Pei Chi, I'm more suitable for you than Lin Jinrong. Pei Chi looked at Tang Yu in a daze. Qin Anlin thought that she didn't hear him and said it again. This time, she raised her head and looked at his face. Chapter 820. She didn't want to love someone so passionately anymore, and she didn't want to give herself completely to the other party. Never again. Qin Anlin's eyes narrowed. He didn't expect that she would reject him so decisively. Just as he was about to say something, his waist was hugged, her soft body was pressed against his. It was soft and smooth. This was probably the so-called soft and fragrant jade. Pei Chi hugged Qin Anlin, and her voice was seductive. President Qin, I predict that you will have a fight later. Her fingers touched his ribs, and she looked up and smiled mischievously. The ribs here, are they done? I don't necessarily lose. His eyes narrowed, and he was fascinated by her playful and lively expression. In Tang Yu's eyes, their interaction was simply burning with anger. Yes, he wanted Qin Anlin to keep Jinrong in check, so that Chi and Jinrong wouldn't be together so soon. But what did he see now? He saw Pei Chi and Qin Anlin hugging each other. Was this the speed of a rocket? Tang Yu couldn't bear it. Pei Chi jumped away lightly and said goodbye to Qin Anlin. She also mouthed to him, Come on. Qin Anlin couldn't help laughing. He stood and watched her enter the elevator. After sending off his little fairy, he was faced with a fierce beast. Qin Anlin frowned and smiled. Not feeling well. He took out a cigarette from his pocket, lit it, and took a puff. You drew a painting, and I spent 100 million to send it to Pei Chi. Tang Yu, you can't be too greedy. She is not yours anymore. Tang Yu stood under the moonlight, and he looked more and more noble, but there was also a touch of loneliness. Qin Anlin grew up with him. How could he not see that Shen Lian must have something in her hands, which was why Tang Yu was so afraid of her? He smiled. Actually, if you can't give her happiness, why not let go? Tang Yu said in a hoarse voice, Qin Anlin, she will be mine in the end. Qin Anlin stretched out his finger and shook it gently. No, Tang Yu, you're wrong. Pei Chi belongs to herself now. He laughed wantonly. Tang Yu, it's not that you can't see it, you just don't dare to admit it. Right now, Pei Chi might still love you, but she also hates you. She doesn't want to be with anyone, but you, me, and Lin Jinrong. Among the three of us, she will never be with you. However, at this time, Qin Anlin did not think that when Tang Yu temporarily gave up, he had grabbed the last straw for his love with Pei Chi. When necessary, he would let it go. Close the door and be careful. Even if Pei Chi fell in love with Qin Anlin or Lin Jinrong, she would still return to his side in the end. This was the humblest thought in Tang Yu's heart, and the deepest scar. Then don't touch her. Tang Yu slowly took off his coat and threw it aside. Qin Anlin finished smoking the cigarette in his hand, threw it on the ground, and stepped on it to put it out. He looked down and chuckled. Do you want to fight? He raised his head again. I heard that men who are dissatisfied with their desires will like violence. The veins on Tang Yu's forehead were bulging. Qin Anlin smiled again. Do you dare to say that you had sex with Shen Lian? Tang Yu's punch was coming. Qin Anlin was prepared and quickly dodged. Chapter 821. Qin Anlin had long disliked Tang Yu. The two of them pounced on each other like two wild beasts. However, he had really underestimated the fighting power of a man with unsatisfied desires. Damn, he's really ruthless. He wiped the blood from the corner of his lips and pounced on her again. Bastard. You said you don't want it, but you're very honest, right? She's mine. Yours. Why don't you go and see if Pei Chi still wants you? Let's see if she'll let you go or not. Violence mixed with rude words. Under the dim light, the two of them were inseparable. Pei Chi went upstairs and thought for a while before opening the door to Old Can's condominium. As she expected, Old Can was not back yet. She walked to the window of the living room and looked down. The two wild beasts were still fighting, their stamina was so good. Pei Chi went to take a shower. When she came out, she took out her cell phone and called Old Can, but his cell phone was switched off. She threw her cell phone away, opened a bag of snacks, and leaned against the window to watch the wild beasts fight. She would call Old Can's cell phone every once in a while, but no one picked up. Eventually, she threw her cell phone aside and leaned against the window to eat her snacks. At this moment, Old Can was being pestered by Su Mo in one of the suites. They were old friends, so she was very familiar with each other's bodies and knew what the other liked. He fell asleep at one point. It was like a raging fire that was burning. Old Can's sweat and Su Mo's sweat made the autumn night a little hotter. After 2 rounds, Old Can calmed down for a while and flipped over to lie down. He reached for his pants on the bedside table and took out a cigarette. Su Mo's face was flushed. She propped herself up and lit the cigarette for him before lying down again. Her slender fingers stroked Old Can's xiong fur and murmured with satisfaction, "It's been so many years, and you've never stopped doing this?" Old Can took a deep puff and exhaled. Coupled with his rough appearance, the entire suite was filled with the smell of his hormones. He glanced at her and smiled. "Aren't you the same? You're still as greedy as before. You can't satisfy it no matter what." Suemo was a little angry, but it didn't seem like she was angry. Instead, she felt sad. How could she not understand old Can's pun? She and he used to be together, nothing, but she has ambition. At that time, he wasn't her only man, and she wasn't his only woman, but during the most difficult days, they had indeed hugged each other through the most difficult nights. She was addicted to the Vanity Fair and had cried many times. She remembered how Lao Can hugged her and patted her back with his thick palms, coaxing her. "Suemo, if you really can't take it anymore, you can quit. I'll take care of you." He raised her, but at that time, he was just a part-time worker with a monthly salary of 10,000 yuan. He might be able to feed her, but he really couldn't give her what she wanted. After that, they separated. Even before she had succeeded, she knew that if she didn't leave now, she would agree to Lao Can's request. Not only would that cause her to stagnate, but it would also cause Lao Can to lose his direction in life. So from the looks of it today, her choice to separate was the right one. Even after all these years, she would always think of how Lao Can had slapped her when she had broken up with him. Chapter 822. Old Can let go and left B City for H City. After that, Lao Can became a dazzling new star in the photography world, winning international awards and getting tired of it. It only took him 2 years to do so. No one knew how hard Old Can worked during those 2 years and how many times he sacrificed his life for outdoor shoots. At that time, he was living a befuddled and numb life. Many people chased after his works, but only he himself knew how soulless those works were. How hollow. All along, no one understood him. Old Can squinted his eyes. His heart was throbbing because of the past. Sumo's slender fingers curled around Old Can's xiong hair. Her voice was a little hoarse because of the passion. "Tell me the truth, do you have any disciples that you like?" Lao Can puffed a smoke ring at her delicate face and held her slender body with his big hands. He said in a hoarse voice, "I like you better. After so many years, it's still the best to fuck this body." He carried Suemo and walked toward the bathroom. Suemo knew what he wanted to do. She leaned on his shoulder and hit him, screaming, "Old Can, put me down. You shameless old hooligan. Don't you like it when I act like a hooligan? Suemo, you little bitch." He pulled her down and covered her mouth with his bearded lips. He kissed her intensely like the stopper of a hot water bottle. Suemo was a very shrewish woman. However, she would only be as soft as a puddle of water under Old Can's body. She hugged his strong neck and kissed him. The warm wine lingered on Sumo's body. Just as she was intoxicated, Lao Can suddenly stopped holding her. Suemo opened her eyes and looked at Old Kansas. Her voice was hoarse. "Old Can, what's wrong?" Hot water splashed on their faces and flowed down. Both of their faces were covered in water, and they couldn't see each other clearly. However, Old Can looked at her very seriously and asked very seriously, "Suemo, if I ask you again many years ago, what would you say?" Suemo was stunned. After looking at him for a long time, she slid down from his body and wrapped herself with a towel. "Weren't we happy just now?" Old Can frowned and looked at Suemo. "Are you happy?" Suemo wrapped herself in a bathrobe and walked out. She took out Old Can's cigarette and smoked it. She watched as Old Can walked out naked. He stood in front of her with a bulging erection. It had not subsided yet. Suemo took a puff of smoke. This man was almost 40 years old, but his appetite and stamina were still unbelievably good. His muscles were so strong that she was about to fall apart, But, so what? She thought desolately that Lao Can wanted to be with her and marry her. She was well aware of that. But she couldn't give birth. She had been pregnant before, the child of a married tycoon. She had suffered a massive hemorrhage due to ectopic pregnancy. After the operation, the doctor told her that she had no chance of having another child. That day, she stood alone in a daze, thinking of nothing else but Lao, Kansas. Because she knew that no matter how many men she slept with, Lao Can could forgive them all and wouldn't mind. But, she couldn't live without children. He is a romantic and wants to live an idyllic life. But she was just a literary chicken that could no longer lay eggs. Suemo took a deep puff of her cigarette in frustration and looked at Old Kansas. Must you bring up something so disappointing? Old Kan's pupils contracted rapidly, and the word hurt was clearly written on his face. He rubbed his neck and asked, "Is this something that's disappointing?" Suemo was initially feeling a little passionate, but it was all gone now. She had always been a decisive woman. Since she couldn't be with Old Kan, she shouldn't drag it out. Chapter 8:23. With that, Suemo picked up Old Kan's clothes and threw them at his feet. "Put on your clothes and leave." She walked to the door and opened it. However, the moment the door opened, Pei Huan was sitting by the door like a stray puppy with tears in her eyes. At this moment, Old Kan was completely naked. In fact, he was even in that state. Pei Huan's rosy lips were slightly agape. She was obviously shocked, her eyes turned even redder. She looked at Old Kan's body, which was covered in red marks. There were hickeys and scratches. Suemo only had a bathrobe hanging loosely on her body, and her face was flushed. Even an idiot would know what had happened. Pei Huan looked at this and that. Then, she burst into tears and ran away. Suemo rolled her eyes and slammed the door shut. She walked up to Old Kan and poked his chest with her slender fingers. "How dare you get involved with someone like Pei Huan?" Old Kan grabbed her hand and flung it away as he started to put on his clothes. Suemo did not give up and pulled his hair again. "Old Kan, did you hear what I said?" He narrowed his eyes. "Suemo, Chief Editor Su, what right do you have to meddle in my business?" He pulled up his zipper, but it was stuck. He pulled it up forcefully. It was a little painful, but not as painful as the pain in his heart. Suemo glared at him. Was he really going to leave? This old jerk. He was an old hooligan. Old Kan looked at her coldly. "Suemo, you haven't changed at all." Suemo felt a stabbing pain in her heart. She pursed her lips tightly as she watched him walk out and slam the door shut. The perspiration on her body was starting to turn cold, and it was very uncomfortable. Old Kan walked out to the elevator and saw Pei Huan squatting there. He walked into the elevator and was hugged from behind the moment he entered. He pressed the button for the first floor and said coldly, "Why? You're willing to pay for it." Pei Huan was lying on his back. His back was very wide, just like Pei Ming's. "You slept with her." Pei Huan's small hands hugged his waist and slowly slid down to his abdomen. She noticed how pathetic he was. Old Kan had a bad habit. His body was as impulsive as a beast, and he would get up the moment a woman teased him. Especially beautiful women. Pei Huan bit the back of his neck like a little female beast. "She didn't suck you dry." Old Kan was in a bad mood. He looked into the mirror and saw the little fairy clinging to him. "Pei Huan, do you really want to be fucked by me?" His voice did not carry a trace of emotion, and there was even a rare hint of disdain. Pei Huan did not mind. She kissed his neck and his skin that still had the scent of another woman. Old Kan stretched out his hand, and the cameraman's head was twisted off. Then, there was the sound of clothes being torn apart. Pei Huan widened her eyes and looked at Old Kan. Pain, she was in great pain. However, Old Ken did not stop and tore her into two halves. That night, Pei Huan learned what it meant to be fierce, what it meant to be a beast. A blood dome appeared on Old Can's shoulder. Pei Huan had bitten. When it was over, he panted heavily. When he calmed down, he felt a little regretful. Firstly, it was because he knew that he was venting his anger on her. Secondly, the girl under him was younger than him by 15 or 16 years. She could be his daughter. Chapter 8:24. If Pei Huan said yes at this moment, Old Ken would really marry her. But Pei Huan was half serious. She just wanted to have a taste of him. It was as simple as that. She wanted to monopolize Pei Chi-Chi's body. Everything was good and she wanted to take it for herself. But now, she realized that this man did not belong to Pei Chi-Chi. He belonged to another woman. That woman could let him be naked, open the door, and tell him to get lost, and he would not have any temper. At that time, Pei Huan knew that Old Ken loved Su Mo. It was a genuine love. No matter how many women he had experienced, Su Mo would always be the light in his heart. Just like Pei Chi-Chi and Lin Jinrong. Pei Huan was not stupid. She would be stupid if she asked him to take responsibility. Wearing his jacket, Pei Huan looked at him and said, "I only wanted to sleep with you once. Now that I've slept with you, it's nothing special." She did not seem to care. Old Ken did not say anything. He pulled up his pants and left. After he left, Pei Huan stood in the elevator until he was far away. Then, she kicked the elevator door forcefully. What? He just zipped up and left. He did not even send her back. Pei Huan's heart was empty. She had obtained Old Can's body. Although it was painful, it was actually quite comfortable, but her heart felt even more empty. She was like a child who had wanted something for a long time. Then, she realized that she wanted more, but she did not know how to get it. Old Ken hailed a cab back. When he parked the car in front of the apartment, he saw two beasts fighting. He smiled. It was an intense fight. Ignoring them, he unbuttoned his shirt and went upstairs. When he reached the apartment, the lights were on. Obviously, Pei Chi-Chi was there. When he opened the door, he saw her leaning against the window. She was wearing long pajamas and walking barefoot. Old Ken took off his shirt and went into the bathroom to take a shower. When he came out, Pei Chi-Chi was still leaning against the window. He went to the kitchen and opened the fridge. He took out 2 cans of beer and handed one to her. Then, he looked downstairs. They were really good at fighting. Old Ken raised his eyebrows. Won't anything happen if they fight like this? Pei Chi-Chi's little face was expressionless. She just looked at Lao Ken and looked downstairs. She said faintly, "I smell perfume on you." Old Ken sniffed herself. How could she still smell after taking a shower? Pei Chi-Chi lay down and asked lazily, "Who were you with?" Old Can's heart skipped a beat. He raised his head and gulped down half a can of drink. After a while, he decided to hide the matter between him and Su Mo. If he told Su Mo about it, his little disciple would probably kill him. After pondering for a while, Old Ken said slowly, "Well, I have something to say." Pei Chi-Chi's gaze was still on the 2 people downstairs. Weren't they tired after fighting for so long? Old Can's voice rang in her ears, Chi-Chi, I slept with Pei Huan." Qin Anlin was knocked to the ground, and Tang Yu kicked him twice. So violent. Wait, what did Old Ken say? Pei Chi-Chi turned her head and looked at him. Old Ken smiled bitterly. "I fell asleep in a moment of heat." Pei Chi-Chi glared at him. Old Ken wanted to smoke, but she was so fierce that he did not dare to move. He scratched his head and said, "She doesn't want me to take responsibility, so, that's it." That was it. After a long time, Pei Chi snapped back to reality. She looked straight at Old Can and narrowed her eyes. Your perfume. Chapter 825. Pei Chi's voice was very slow and light, but it gave off a hair-raising feeling. Pei Huan doesn't need such a mature perfume. Old Can, think about it carefully. Did you miss anything that you didn't tell me? Old Can's eyes were as wide as saucers, and he said gruffly, what could there be? Like the owner of the perfume. Pei Chi grabbed the front of his bathrobe. Who were you with before Pei Huan? Old Can stared at Pei Chi for a long time before he said gruffly, with Su Mo, slept with her. Old Can's eyes widened, and his pupils shrank. He didn't say a word. At this moment, Pei Chi was sure that Pei Huan had used Su Mo's second-hand goods tonight. You're amazing. 2 in 1 night. Pei Chi threw the snacks in her hand, picked up something from the side, and threw it at Old Can. Old Can jumped up and begged for mercy as he ran, but you promised not to hit my face. Don't you have any shame? Pei Chi didn't care. I said you can't sleep with Pei Huan. Not only did you sleep with her, but you also slept with someone else. You can sleep with her in the future. After throwing the things in her hand, Pei Chi picked up the things around her and threw them at Old Kansas. The apartment was like a battlefield. The fight was intense downstairs, but it was even more intense upstairs. Old Can didn't dare to fight back. On one hand, he felt guilty. On the other hand, he didn't want to fight with a girl. He was rough, and what if he hurt her? Pei Chi had nothing else to throw, so she took off her slippers and hit Old Can. Old Can hugged his head, opened the door, and walked out. Can't I leave? But how could Pei Chi let him go so easily? The more he admitted defeat, the more ferocious she became. Tang Yu and Qin Anlin were beating each other up, but they suddenly stopped. They just watched as Pei Chi chased after Old Kansas. Both of them were in their pajamas, and one of them was barefoot and holding slippers. They rushed out of the elevator just like that. It was a scene that no one could imagine. Are we still going to fight? Qin Anlin glanced at Tang Yu, got up, took out 2 crumpled cigarettes from his pocket, straightened them, and handed one to Tang Yu. Tang Yu took it and stood with Qin Anlin, watching the 2 people running over there. Qin Anlin suddenly said, in fact, none of us can give her happiness like Lao Kansas. That was because Lao Tzu only knew how to give, and would never ask her to take out something she didn't want to take out. She was full of energy and happiness when she was with Lao Can. Tang Yu, if you let go, I'll let go. What do you think? Qin Anlin suddenly had a lofty aspiration. Tang Yu raised her head slightly and unbuttoned a few buttons on her shirt, revealing her jade-like skin and sexy collarbone. I can't do it. He turned his head sideways. Qin Anlin, I'm different from you. You just like Pei Chi, her character, and her appearance. But I'm different. To me, Chi is my life. He would never give up on her. No matter how difficult it was, he would wait for that day. He also believed that her love and hatred for him would last until that day, and she would not fall in love with someone else. If she could love someone else so easily, it would not be love anymore. As the night breeze blew, he watched as Pei Chi gradually stopped running. She was looking at him in a daze. Her eyes looked pitiful. Tang Yu smiled warmly at her and walked over slowly. Chapter 826. Pei Chi stood still with one of her slippers in her hand. She threw it away mechanically, however, after throwing it away, her feet were still bare. Her fair and delicate feet were very alluring, just like the day when she walked to his room door. Only in front of him would she behave so helplessly, as though her IQ was not on the line. Tang Yu walked over slowly and picked up her slippers. Before she could react, he squatted down in front of her humbly and held her smooth little feet. Her little toes were as beautiful as little enoki mushrooms. His fingers could not help but caress them and quickly put them on for her. Pei-Chi-Chi shrunk her feet and wanted to escape, however, his palm held hers and did not allow her to escape. Following that, he stood up and slowly moved his hand up to hold her slender waist. When she came back to her senses, she was pressed against the body of his black limousine, her back was cold, and in front of her was his warm body. Beside them were Qin Anlin and Lao Kansas. Lao Kan was quite happy. No matter who it was that had dragged Pei-Chi-Chi away, he had to thank them. Yes, he had to thank them handsomely. However, the next second, he was shocked. Damn! They really kissed. Pei-Chi-Chi's gaze fell on the corner of Tang Yu's lips. There was a trace of blood and the corner of his lips was bruised. It was obvious that he was injured. She looked at him in a daze while his slender fingers touched her red lips. His voice was unbelievably hoarse. You let him kiss you. She seemed to have sensed danger as she lifted her eyes and stared at him. However, in the next second, her lips were swallowed by him, and he sucked on them like a raging wave. He rolled her up and tossed her into the sky before falling back down. It was another round of intense kissing. It was intense and repeated, just like that. He kept being tossed around like a small boat on the sea, unable to reach the shore. When she came back to her senses, she realized that he was scalding hot. Everywhere was scalding hot. His well-defined fingers held her little face, and his other hand threaded through her long hair. He pulled her close to him savagely, and their lips touched at a negative distance. She felt as if she was going to melt from his heat. Her legs were so weak that she couldn't react at all. Those fragmented voices were all crushed and swallowed by his lips and tongue. His body struggled slightly as he was pressed against the car even more forcefully. Tang Yu seemed to have gone mad. He arched his body and adjusted his face to make it easier for him to kiss her more deeply. Lao Kan chuckled, while Qin Anlin's expression was unfathomable. She knew that Tang Yu was putting on a show for her because he had kissed Pei-Chi-Chi before. However, that light kiss couldn't even be called a kiss. It could only be called a contact between lips. The kiss in front of her was filled with hope, as if Tang Yu could break through everything and take her at any time. Even the air was so warm that it was about to explode. At this moment, Qin Anlin was deeply saddened. He said that he wanted to pursue Pei-Chi-Chi, but now she was kissed by Tang Yu, who had a fiancé. She was almost at the point where she wanted a car Z, but he couldn't do anything about it. He didn't even have the courage to pull them apart. Pei-Chi-Chi finally regained some strength and gave him a slap. Tang Yu didn't dodge and let her little hand hit his handsome face. However, when her hand left his face, he caught her little hand. He didn't say anything, but his gaze was lingering. There was a ring on the ring finger of the hand that was holding her hand. Chapter 8:27. Pei-Chi-Chi's eyes were a little blurred. She looked at the ring and pursed her lips. His heart throbbed painfully. She raised her head and looked at him. What does this mean? Her words were like a sharp blade. She was in pain, but he was in more pain than she was. He held on to her little hand and slowly but forcefully pulled her little hand to his cheek. The cold man's ring was pressed against her cold little face. At this moment, Pei-Chi-Chi wanted to cry. Tang Yu's voice was a little hoarse. Chi-Chi, I'll wait for you. These words were like a curse, which successfully made Pei-Chi-Chi unable to sleep that night. At this moment, she looked at him with countless little stars in her eyes. Her body shrank, she bit her lip and looked at him in disbelief, as if she was looking at a lunatic. After that, she ran away. She ran away and didn't come back to get a slipper. Old Kan sighed, walked over to pick up the slipper, and walked slowly into the elevator. Only Qin Anlin and Tang Yu were left at the scene. Qin Anlin walked over and chuckled. He looked at Tang Yu. Do you feel better after washing Pei Chi-Chi's little mouth with your own saliva? Tang Yu turned around. Qin Anlin's smile became mocking. Tang Yu, do you know that you are a lunatic? A lunatic in love. He wasn't sure at first, but now he was sure that his biggest enemy wasn't Lin Jinrong, but Tang Yu. Not for anything else, but because the person Pei Chi-Chi loved was Tang Yu. Qin Anlin had seen tonight what it meant to be completely used. He was such a fool. The funny thing was that he was still unwilling to give up and was still willing to be used by Tang Yu again and again. Because he couldn't bear to give up. He tried to give up, but he failed. Old Can returned to the apartment. Pei Chi-Chi wasn't there. He stood at her door for a moment, then knocked. Slippers. I don't want it anymore. Her voice came from inside. Old Can grinned and didn't say anything more. Tang Yu was really his savior. As soon as he showed up, Pei Xiaoqi immediately stopped acting. What happened to the energy that was chasing him just now? It was all gone. Sure enough, everything has its vanquisher. Lao Can sighed. He knocked on the door. Are you alright? Pei Chi-Chi's voice was a little nasal. Old Can, go away. Oh, he was really angry. Old Can took the slippers and went back. Anyway, this girl would calm down. He could just come back tomorrow to get it. He returned to his side and lay on the sofa. He was not in a good mood. After all, he was rejected by Su Mo once again. Su Mo was the only one that Lao Can truly had feelings for. However, his biggest mistake tonight was sleeping with Pei Huan. Old Can was a man who respected women. He really didn't despise Pei Huan. However, how could two people who didn't love each other be together? If he had slept with her, then forget it. That night, many people were destined to have a sleepless night. Tang Yu's car didn't go straight back to the Rose Garden. Instead, he drove to a secluded clubhouse. It was quiet all the way until he pushed open the door of a private room. The person inside had his back facing him. Tang Yu didn't ask him to turn around. He went over and sat down. The two of them were silent. After a long time, he asked softly, "How is Shinjongshan?" The man stood in the dark and said softly, "I suspect that Shinjongshan has recovered." Tang Yu's fingers tightened. Chapter 828. In the darkness, the man continued to speak in a light tone, but every word was enough to change the situation of B City. But the real power of Jin Taihe is now in the hands of Shen Lian, and Shinjongshan is probably at his wit's end. The man paused. Maybe he wants more. Tang Yu knew very well what that more was. In this game of chess, the one he wanted the most was Chi-Chi, the little wife he had left behind. And what Shinjongshan wanted was not only Jin Taihe, but also an heir. It was obviously impossible for Shen Lian, and the only blood relation of Shinjongshan, was, and when this veil was lifted, part of the truth was bound to be known by Pei Chi-Chi. He couldn't stop it, and he didn't want to stop it. Maybe today, he should give it his all. Tang Yu closed his eyes, thinking of the scene of Qin Anlin kissing Chi-Chi tonight. Damn it, at that time, he almost rushed over and wanted to take her away and hide her in a place where no one could find her. There was no Jinrong, no Qin Anlin. Maybe, he should abandon the identity of the brother, even if she would hate him more. But, it could also let him get close to her legitimately, not as a perverted brother who wanted to possess his sister. Tang Yu was silent for a while, and disappeared in the dark room. And the man who had been carrying his body slowly turned back at this time, and there was a touch of pain on his handsome face. That face, was it him? Pei Chi-Chi got up early in the morning, and her head was dizzy. Last night was like a dream. BMW, fancy clothes, diamond jewelry. Tang Yu, she was stunned for a while, and then laughed at herself. Pei Chi, that has nothing to do with you. You are just a small photographer. If Lao Can is not here, you have to squeeze into the subway to go to work and take outdoor scenes with your camera. This is the truest life you have ever lived. She got up and quickly brushed her teeth and washed her face. After making 2 sets of breakfast, she went to knock on Lao Can's door. Although she was still angry, she was much more open-minded. Lao Can could sleep with Pei Huan because Pei Huan wanted to, so there was no need to take it too seriously. When Lao Can came out to open the door, he didn't expect it to be Pei Chi, so he only wore pajama pants and was bare-chested. His thick xiong fur made Pei Chi's eyes pop out. Of course, there were also scratches on his waist, as if a cat had scratched him. Lao Can noticed her gaze and felt a little uncomfortable. He scratched his head and said, "Wait for me." He put on his clothes and went to have breakfast. Pei Chi looked at him and asked, "Did Pei Huan or Su Mo catch you?" Old Can blushed and coughed lightly. Pei Huan isn't that wild. He's only meowing like a kitten. Only that fierce bitch, Su Mo, would scratch him so fiercely as if she's never seen a man before. Pei Chi was unhappy again. Very proud, aren't you? No, absolutely not. I was also muddle-headed at that time, wasn't I? Old Can cared about his little disciple very much. Not to mention anything else, just living together for a while, his little disciple's cooking had conquered his stomach. Su Mo's rejection was no longer as painful as before. Pei Chi looked down and said softly after a while, "If you don't love Pei Huan, don't provoke her anymore." Old Can was a good person, so it was not surprising that Pei Huan liked him. However, it was better to stay away from a man who had someone else in his heart. Seeing that she had finally relented, Old Can was also relieved. He grunted and his eyes were filled with tears. The two of them reconciled, and Pei Chi took Old Can's car to the magazine office. Chapter 829. Xiao Pei, you will be in charge of Mr. Tang's Weibo in the future. It's very simple. You just need to interact with the fans and post some updates regularly. The editor-in-chief paused for a moment. I thought about it for a long time. To avoid trouble, I will use the name of the fan club. This way, it will be easier to play by the law. Pei Chi really wanted to curse. Did the editor-in-chief play by the law too much last night? Tang Yu was a celebrity, but he wasn't a celebrity for sale. Why would he have a fan club? Moreover, was it easy to play by the law? If things went wrong, the entire magazine would be wiped out. Where did the editor-in-chief get his confidence from? The editor-in-chief saw her dissatisfaction and smiled. Of course, we won't use our magazine's name. We will open the account in our private name. This account is like our baby. We have to love it and take care of it. Xiao Pei, you are the one I trust the most. I will leave my child in your hands. When it came to shamelessness, Pei Chi only admired the editor-in-chief. Even though she was cursing in her heart, Pei Chi still took the slip of paper with the account password and went out. She logged into the account. Amy slid over and asked quietly, "How was the charity night last night?" "It's all in the newspapers, but I didn't see you." Pei Chi answered Amy while busying herself. "I'm just a small character." Amy replied, "Oh." She slid back and said as if she was sleepwalking, "But I think the person in the painting looks like you." Pei Chi didn't say anything. She remembered that the painting was in Old Can's hands. What happened after that? Just as she was thinking, the express delivery arrived. It was from Su Mo, and the item was the painting. Of course, Pei Chi thought deeper. Su Mo was the one who slept with Old Can last night. She opened the painting and confirmed that it was the painting. Amy looked at it eagerly. It's really you. Through this painting, she could imagine countless scenes of Pei Chi and Tang Yu living together. Ex-husband and ex-wife. Pei Chi, did you and him? Amy lowered her voice and looked around secretly. After making sure no one was around, she asked, did you do it in the kitchen? Pei Chi put the painting away and glanced at the gossipy Amy. Yes, he said expressionlessly. Then she went to deal with the microblogging. Amy was stunned. She didn't expect Pei Chi to admit it so easily. The kitchen was too exciting. On the other side, Pei Chi was focused on dealing with the new fans. Looking at the hundreds of thousands of fans that had increased in just a few days, she was a little confused. Was this the effect of a celebrity? Or was it because of him? The number of fans was still increasing at an incredible speed. The number was constantly refreshing, and there were also many people who sent private messages asking about Tang Yu's latest situation, the fans Chu Shibei. And the fan Chu Chu's fans Xiang's fans fan. It was sent by a fan named Chu Shibei. The question was very simple. Who is your favorite? Pei Chi was stunned for a moment, and then she privately replied, are you asking me or Mr. Tang? The other side quickly replied, you. Pei Chi's heart skipped a beat. She stared at it for a long time but didn't reply. The person in front of her was just a stranger, but his question struck directly at her heart. It made her want to escape. After a long time, she typed on the keyboard again. The person I love the most has left. He won't be coming back. Chapter 8:30. Pei Chi stared at the three words, Chu Shibei, in a daze. After about half an hour, she thought that the person would not return, but the pop-up window popped up again. The person I love has also left, but I am waiting for her. I believe that she will come back. Waiting for her. Then he was, are you a man? Pei Chi quickly typed over. The other side replied with a smiling emoji, which meant that he admitted it. Pei Chi thought that the people who paid attention to this microblog should be little girls who loved to fantasize. How could there be a man here? She shook her head. She really wanted to blacklist him, but she couldn't make up her mind as she clicked on the mouse. At this time, the pop-up window popped up again, this time with a paragraph of text. I believe that you're him, will also come back. He just has no way to do it now. Pei Chi sat and stared at the text for a long time, so long that she didn't notice Amy coming over. Amy leaned over to take a look, then coughed softly and said in an experienced tone, Pei Chi, are you in an online relationship? Let me tell you, it's not reliable. Once you get on a date, you will find that the idol of your dreams is actually a poor loser. Pei Chi tilted her head. Have you been cheated before? Amy's face darkened. Pei Chi, you are so annoying. Pei Chi thought that the 27-year-old Amy was quite cute. She imitated Amy and leaned over. Have you been cheated of your money in sex? Amy was a southerner, so her words were a little coy. At this time, Pei Chi stepped on her thunder, so she exploded in a coy manner. Pei Chi, you. What kind of truth are you saying? She said as she sat down again, her face red, and her voice was as low as possible. It's a secret. Who hasn't met a few scumbags before marriage? Pei Chi smiled. When she turned around, another message popped up on the computer. Chu Shibei asked to add her as a friend and gave her a string of QQ numbers. Pei Chi laughed. A little boy. Who still used QQ to chat these days? However, she still added him. Sure enough, it was a little brother. Tang Yu also had a little brother, who claimed to be a 20-year-old newbie. Pei Chi thought about how he said that the person he loved had left and that he was waiting. She laughed happily. Little wimp, always pretending to be deep and profound. The cute Chu Shibei suddenly said, I ordered flowers for you, 99 white roses. Do you like them? Pei Chi was stunned. Why? Attached was a screenshot of her QQ profile. Her birthday was on it, and it happened to be today. Pei Chi didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He was thinking like a little boy again. At this moment, she forgot that she was only 22 years old. I still think you should keep the money until your girlfriend comes back. Pei Chi's fingers moved quickly. Then you can buy her a present to make her happy. First coax big sister, then coax my little fairy. The little boy's mouth was especially sweet. Pei Chi was in a great mood. Were all the boys nowadays so interesting? She suddenly thought of Tang Axean. If Tang Axean was here, she would definitely like Chu Shibei very much. At this time, the editor-in-chief came out of the bathroom and saw Pei Chi's fingers typing quickly on the keyboard. He smiled sweetly. What a good employee. Pei Chi looked up and saw the editor-in-chief smile. She suddenly felt that this job was not bad. At least she could chat casually at work. Chapter 831. Pei Chi sighed in her heart. In fact, she did not want anything to happen between her and Jinrong. In addition to the uneasiness of her identity, as she had said to Qin Anlin, she really did not want to have any feelings now. It was good to be alone. Before answering the phone, she said to Chu Shibei, a friend was looking for her, so she answered the phone. A few words came quickly from the other side of the phone. Boyfriend. Pei Chi picked up Lin Jinrong's phone and looked at the 3 words with a smile. Silly child, she had just said that she did not have a boyfriend. Because she was smiling, her voice was particularly light. Jinrong. Lin Jinrong was sitting in the president's office at the headquarters of Lin Group. His young face was very handsome. He was holding a mobile phone in one hand and a gold pen in the other, writing and drawing on the table. Pei Chi, I heard that someone is having a birthday today. Is that true? Pei Chi was a little surprised. She pursed her lips and did not know what to say. He would not just wish her a happy birthday, would he? Lin Jinrong waited for a while, but Pei Chi did not say anything, so he directly said, let's have dinner together tonight. Pei Chi, I just came back today and did not make it in time to dance with you yesterday. Is it okay to treat me to dinner today? Pei Chi found it hard to refuse, so she agreed and made an appointment. After putting down the phone, she felt an indescribable stuffiness in her heart. She could face Qin Anlin's pressure with a cold face, but Jinrong was different. She pondered for a long time before she found a string of conversations on the computer screen, and it was sent by Chu Shibei. Are you still there? Do you have a date tonight? Pei Chi smiled and her fingers fell on the keyboard, typing very slowly. There is one, someone I used to like asked me to dinner tonight. The other side was also silent for a long time before a line of words was sent. Do you still like him? Do I? Pei Chi looked at the screen for a long time and smiled slightly. If he is willing, we can be good friends. This time, the other side's speed was obviously much faster. Yes, love can't be forced. Pei Chi replied with 4 words, you're still young but full of mischief. Give me the address. I'll send the roses over. A message was typed. In fact, Pei Chi was still in a difficult position, but Chu Shibei sent another pitiful emoji. Miss, you won't even give me this chance, right? All right. Pei Chi gave him the address of the magazine and left his phone number. On the other side, Tang Yu looked at the name she left behind. Pei Xiaohua. She's really good at naming things. Tang Yu looked serious. He pressed the internal line and called Xiao Ran. Xiao Ran came in and looked at the CEO's serious face. "This address, send a bouquet of white roses, 99 of them." Tang Yu handed a note to Xiao Ran. Xiao Ran nodded. He was a little surprised. Was this for President Xin? But when he took the note, he was a little confused. Pei Xiaohua. Xiao Ran asked with some difficulty, "Is it Pei Chi-Chi?" Tang Yu still looked serious. "Write it as Pei Xiaohua. And don't let anyone know that it's from me. Write it as Chu Shibei." Xiao Ran nodded, knowing that she was the only one who knew about this. She immediately went to do it. Although it was a little messy, her heart was as clear as a mirror. In the end, the CEO only had Pei Chi-Chi in his heart, and no one else. Chapter 832. The card with Pei Xiaohua's name on it made Pei Chi-Chi happy for the whole day. 99 white roses were placed on her desk. She leaned over and looked at the card. Pei Xiaohua, Chu Shibei. She giggled for a while before replying, "I've received the flowers, Xiao Beibei. We are best friends from now on." Tang Yu was in the middle of a meeting when his phone vibrated. He picked it up and looked at it. Then, a faint smile appeared on his face. Everyone in Xingyuan High School was shocked. It had been a long time since they saw the CEO smile so gently. It seemed like it had been more than a year. Tang Yu looked at it for a while before sending an emoticon. After that, she did not send it, and neither did he. After the meeting, he asked Xiao Ran to stay behind and said calmly, "Go and find out where Mr. Lin ordered dinner tonight." Xiao Ran was a smart person. He immediately realized that it must have something to do with Pei Chi-Chi. He went back to his office and used his connections to find out where it was. Mr. Lin ordered a Michelin restaurant dinner tonight. He even ordered a 3-tiered cake. And 99 red roses. Xiao Ran did not dare to say it out loud. She knew very well who the candlelight dinner and the rose cake were for. She wondered if there was a proposal ring. Sure enough, the CEO's expression did not look good. Xiao Ran left the office. She closed the door and smiled. This vinegar bucket was probably going to be overturned. Tang Yu picked up his phone and found Pei Xiaohua on QQ. He sent a message to her. "Miss, I'll chat with you tonight. I'll sing a birthday song for you, okay?" Mr. Tang was really good when he acted cute. Pei Xiaohua replied, "Stop fooling around. Be good." Although it was only a few words, his anxious heart was strangely soothed. No matter what, Pei Chi-Chi only had him in her heart. After work, Pei Chi-Chi went back to the apartment with Lao Kansas. Lao Kan looked a little listless today. He lay on the sofa and did not move. Although Pei Chi-Chi was still a little angry, she couldn't bear to see him like this. She took his temperature. She poked his forehead with her slender fingers. "You still think you're in your 20s? Too much." She was full of disdain, but she still cooked 2 dishes and a soup for him. Old Kan ate to his satisfaction. "I don't want anyone. Just a little disciple will do." Old Kan looked at Pei Xiaoqi earnestly and said. Pei Chi-Chi glared at him. "Bah! I'll only believe you if you say that again in 2 years." After a while, she remembered something and looked at Lao Kan. "Sumo isn't someone you can control. Lao Kan, find yourself a woman you like and marry." Lao Kan was in a daze for a while before he smiled and looked at Pei Chi-Chi. "What about you? Will you find someone you like to marry? For example, the kid who treated you to dinner tonight?" Pei Chi-Chi couldn't answer. Lao Kan's old Kan was silent as well. After a while, he wiped his face and said, "Let's not talk about this anymore. Let's just live like this." After the incident, Pei Chi-Chi's mood was still a little gloomy when she arrived at the Michelin Hotel. She was sad for Lao Kansas Lin Jinrong had already arrived. He was standing at the entrance of the hotel in a black suit. He was handsome and elegant. This was how Pei Chi-Chi imagined Lin Jinrong to look like when she was in school. But now that she saw him, she was no longer moved. Chapter 833. Just then, a waiter appeared, holding a bouquet of red roses. Lin Jinrong held it in one hand and walked down the stairs to her side. This was the second bouquet she had received today, and it was a red rose that symbolized love. She was a little hesitant. Don't think too much. Lin Jinrong put the bouquet in her arms, still smiling. It's just a meal. Pei Chi-Chi smiled, feeling a little uncomfortable. Lin Jinrong booked a table with a beautiful view. It was next to the window, and they could see the entire night view of B City. After sitting down, Pei Chi-Chi rested her chin on her hand and looked out of the window. Tonight, she wore a long black t-shirt and a white camisole. Her long hair was tied into a ponytail, and she looked thin and small, giving off a refreshing vibe. She clearly didn't put on any makeup, but her facial features were beautiful, and there wasn't a single part of her that wasn't beautiful. She looked out of the window, and Lin Jinrong looked back at her. His eyes were gentle, just like the day they first met. The waiter served the dishes softly and delicately. Finally, a 3-layer cake was served. On the top, there was a Barbie doll taking a bath, and the bubbles around it were especially dreamy. No matter how complicated Pei Chi-Chi felt, she was still a little surprised. This was her first birthday in a real sense. She had only been with Tang Yu in the past, and she had never told him about her birthday. The cake can be eaten later. Lin Jinrong gestured for her to eat first, and then served her naturally. Pei Chi-Chi realized that Lin Jinrong's gestures were very similar to Tang Yu's, and his face was also somewhat similar. She was a little dazed for a moment. Lin Jinrong realized that she was distracted and paused. Chi-Chi. She then came back to her senses and smiled apologetically. I'm sorry. Lin Jinrong smiled. It's okay. Can you share what you were thinking about just now? There was a hint of prying in his tone. Pei Chi-Chi looked at him for a long time, unable to speak. Then, Lin Jinrong knew that she was thinking about Tang Yu. The atmosphere was a little subtle. Tang Yu was an obstacle in her heart that she couldn't overcome, but at the same time, he was also in her heart. Just when the atmosphere was a little awkward, a soft child's voice came from next door, "Sister." Pei Chi-Chi's body trembled, and so did Lin Jinrong. He turned his head to the side, and his mind was in a mess. Sitting at the next table were Tang Yu and Lin Yun. Of course, they had a pretty little girl with them. Be careful. She was chewing on her little finger, but her eyes were fixed on a certain part of Pei Chi-Chi's body. Pei Chi-Chi's heart tightened, and she resisted the urge to cover her clothes. Tang Yu's gaze fell on Lin Jinrong and Pei Chi-Chi's faces. His gaze then fell on the cake and red roses on the table. He said faintly, "Jinrong, I remember your birthday is in spring." It's Chi-Chi's birthday. Lin Jinrong smiled and ignored the uncomfortable situation. He walked over and greeted Lin Yun, "Auntie." Pei Chi-Chi wanted to dig a hole in the ground. Although she didn't want to develop anything with Jinrong, her ex-husband and ex-mother-in-law were there. It was true that she and Jinrong would sit together for a candlelit dinner. Moreover, they were relatives. Tang Yu's gaze was locked on her. Only Lin Jinrong walked over calmly and hugged Xiaoxin. "Xiaoxin, do you miss your brother?" Tang Yu held his forehead, feeling a headache. Lin Yun glanced at her son and sighed softly. Their relationship was a mess. Chapter 834. Pei Chi was in a difficult position. The little guy's cries were quite pitiful. But it was too uncomfortable. She didn't dare to go over and look at Tang Yu. Her legs were still weak from the kiss last night. Lin Yun was also in a difficult position. One was her son, and the other was her nephew. Although her son had divorced her son was still thinking about her. Lin Yun's attitude was vague. She didn't want to lose her composure as an elder in front of Jinrong. Lin Jinrong was well aware of it, but he pretended not to know. He played with Xiaoxin for a while. She was more like a brother than Tang Yu. Xiaoxin wanted Pei Chi to hug her. Lin Jinrong put the little baby in Pei Chi's arms and smiled. "Hug me for a while." Pei Chi hugged her and was a little worried that she would do the same thing she did that day. However, she didn't have any misgivings and obediently lay in her arms. She stared at Pei Chi with her big, tender eyes and licked her little lips. She looked especially cute and adorable. Pei Chi couldn't help but kiss her. Lin Yun looked at Tang Yu. Tang Yu's expression softened a lot. Maybe this was what he had been looking for all his life. Xiaoxin's whole body was soft. She sat on Pei Chi's lap and wanted to eat. "Happy birthday, little sister." Pei Chi sat with Xiaoxin on her lap. Lin Jinrong bent down and leaned close to them. They looked like a family of three. "That hurts, Tang Yu." At this moment, a waiter passed by. Lin Jinrong was about to get up. Although the waiter stepped back in time and didn't hit him, the soup in his hand spilled straight toward Xiaoxin in Pei Chi's arms. In the nick of time, a large palm blocked Xiaoxin's face, and the bowl of hot soup fell straight towards that large palm. Pei Chi's heart almost stopped beating. With a muffled groan, the back of Tang Yu's hand was red. The soup flowed down from the back of his hand. The waiter quickly put down the things in his hand and wiped Tang Yu's fingers with a tissue. When he saw Tang Yu's face, he was even more shocked. "Mr. Tang, I'm sorry." Tang Yu didn't make things difficult for him. He just said indifferently, "Clean up." The waiter finished quickly. Everything calmed down and the atmosphere became strange again. Lin Yun said gently, "It's Chi-Chi's birthday. Let's celebrate together." Pei Chi couldn't refuse an elder, so she finally agreed in a low voice. Once again, they sat together. There were 4 seats, so their little hearts were glued to Pei Chi. At this moment, the manager of the previous incident was alerted. He came over to apologize and especially asked if Tang Yu's hand was injured. Tang Yu said indifferently that it was fine. He and Pei Chi were sitting in the same direction. The manager looked at him, then at Pei Chi, and the child in her hands. He smiled and said, "Mr. Tang, this is your child, right? He looks just like you. She also looks like Mrs. Tang." These words made people feel quite uncomfortable. Pei Chi thought that Tang Yu or Lin Yun would explain, but they didn't. Since no one said anything, it was even more subtle. She coughed lightly and was about to say something when Tang Yu interrupted her. "Bring the dishes we ordered here too." The manager said yes repeatedly and served them personally. Lin Yun looked at Pei Chi, who was holding Axayan awkwardly. She smiled and said, "Let me hold her." Chapter 835. Cake. "I want to eat cake." Xiaoxin pointed at the pretty doll on the cake and licked her lips. Pei Chi was about to eat when Lin Jinrong smiled, "You can eat after the meal. Children eat sweets first and then refuse to eat later. You seem to know a lot." Pei Chi spoke unnaturally. Lin Jinrong looked into her eyes and said slowly, "Sometimes when Aunt comes back, she will take care of Xiaoxin." Pei Chi responded with an "oh," and then didn't know what to say. The 4 adults present did not make a sound, only little Xiaoxin was eating her heart-shaped lamb chop. It was especially fragrant and sweet, it smelled so good. Pei Chi looked at Xiaoxin's little face and couldn't help but think of the restaurant manager's words. Looking closely, Xiaoxin did look more like Tang Yu and also somewhat like herself. Perhaps it was because Tang Yu and she were related by blood, so she had this illusion. But she still felt that it was a little strange. At this moment, Lin Jinrong said calmly, "Chi, I have something to say to you later." Tonight's arrangement was probably ruined. He couldn't propose to her in front of so many people, let alone in front of Tang Yu. As for Tang Yu's appearance at this time, Lin Jinrong didn't think it was purely a coincidence. However, he didn't say it out loud. Some things would be bad if he said it out loud. If he said it out loud, he might not even have the slightest chance. Pei Chi looked at him and forgot to react for a moment. Suddenly, her hand under the table was caught by someone. A warm big palm caught her little hand. It wasn't a tight grip, but she couldn't break free easily. It was Tang Yu. She struggled a little, but he held her even tighter. At this moment, the strength of a man and a woman was so distinct. Pei Chi didn't dare to look at him, nor did she dare to look at Lin Jinrong and Lin Yun, who were opposite her, for fear that they would see through her. It wasn't that she didn't want to struggle, but if she struggled, it wouldn't be good for anyone. Fortunately, he was holding her left hand, so she could still eat. Pei Chi didn't do anything else, she just kept eating. Xiaoxin's chubby little face looked at her and exclaimed, "This older sister can eat so much." Pei Chi's hand paused. Then, she wanted to dig a hole again. She raised her eyes to look at Xiaoxin. It was probably because of her fierce gaze that Xiaoxin's big eyes started to tear up. Then, she started to cry. Pei Chi was at a loss. She looked at Xiaoxin, then at Lin Yun. She wanted to comfort Xiaoxin, but her hand was held by Tang Yu. The hand tightened on her small one for a moment, then let go. Tang Yu got up and hugged Xiaoxin. He patted her back and coaxed her gently. As the baby was being coaxed, it stared at Pei Chi with its big black eyes. There was a hint of arrogance in its eyes. "Hurry up and coax me." Pei Chi didn't know how to coax a baby, so she just looked at him. Tang Yu glanced at her with a reproachful look. Pei Chi was confused. What does it have to do with me? What does it have to do with me? What does it have to do with me? You're the one holding my hand. Otherwise, I would be the one holding the baby now. She didn't say anything. She looked at Tang Yu holding Xiaoxin with a practiced posture, as if he was born to be a father. For a moment, she thought of the child she lost. Her pupils shrank, and her fingers unconsciously placed on her lower abdomen. Chapter 836. As Pei Chi was in a trance, her hand sank and Xiaoxin was already in her hand. The chubby little person looked at her stubbornly. "Coax me." Pei Chi felt that the little person's eyes were very familiar, as if she had seen them before, but she couldn't remember. At this time, Lin Jinrong's cell phone rang. It was Wang Ziki. He looked at it, smiled apologetically at Pei Chi, and walked to the side to answer the phone. As soon as he left, Xiaoxin's little body twisted, and her face was as serious as a doll. "I'm hungry." Pei Chi pinched her little face. "You're the one who ate a lot." Xiaoxin's dark and delicate eyes stared straight at the cake. She really wanted to eat it. Pei Chi's eyes also moved over. "Want to eat it?" Xiaoxin nodded reservedly, and looked straight at her again. Pei Chi smiled and pinched her little face, although the little fellow was quite resistant. She sat down with Xiaoxin in her arms, took down the little doll, and asked the waiter to wash it before giving it to Xiaoxin. Then, she carefully cut a small piece of cake for Xiaoxin. Although Xiaoxin was only 1 year old, actually more than a week old, she could already firmly hold the small spoon and eat the delicious cake. The little person was originally fragrant and soft, but now it was even more fragrant and soft. Embedded in Pei Chi-Chi's arms, it seemed to fill the hole in her heart. At that moment, she suddenly had an absurd thought: how good it would be if Xiaoxin was her child. So healthy, so lively and cute. She looked at the little person's mouth moving, and her eyes couldn't help but soften. She reached out and stroked Xiaoxin's straight black hair. This child's hair was really good, and her little face was also delicate, like a smaller version of Tang Yu. Tang Yu looked at her with gentle eyes. When Lin Jinrong turned around after answering the phone, he first saw Tang Yu's gaze. He was startled for a moment, and then his expression changed. He quickly walked over and looked at the small piece of cake. Of course, there was also little Xiaoxin, who had a satisfied look on her face as she ate. Her chubby little hands held onto a small spoon, and she looked just like an excavator as she dug and ate without chewing. Lin Jinrong's heart tightened. He took the cake and flipped it up and down, inside and out. No. His face turned pale, and he looked at Xiaoxin seriously. Did you eat something just now? Xiaoxin's chubby little hand was holding a small spoon. She was frightened by his appearance. Her delicate little face looked as if she was about to cry but wasn't about to. Lin Jinrong's face turned even paler. Tang Yu also realized what had happened. He stood up and guessed what had happened. Fresh flowers, cake, and a diamond ring. Jinrong had wanted to propose tonight. But now, the ring might have been eaten by his little heart. Tang Yu pursed his lips and called the cake maker over. His expression was stern. Are you sure you've put the ring in? The cake maker was on the verge of breaking down. He gritted his teeth and nodded. Yes, Mr. Tang. Tang Yu's gaze fell on Xiaoxin's little face. Xiaoxin probably saw the change in his expression, and she was so scared that she finally peed her pants. She wailed loudly. Pei Chi-Chi was also stunned. How could there be a ring? I put it in. Lin Jinrong's voice was restrained. Xiaoxin might have eaten it. Chapter 837. Tang Yu took 2 steps, paused, and stretched out his long hand. He held Xiaoxin in one hand and grabbed Pei Chi-Chi's hand with the other. He held her hand right in front of Jinrong. Come with me to the hospital. Pei Chi-Chi didn't have a chance to think, and secondly, she couldn't refuse. She was the one who gave Xiaoxin the cake. She quickly caught up with him and left with Tang Yu, one after the other. At this moment, she forgot that Jinrong was behind them, and that the ring was the one he used to propose to her. Lin Yun didn't follow them, and Lin Jinrong also stood there. Everything was quiet, and the surrounding noise didn't seem to affect this place. Lin Jinrong placed his hands on both sides of the dining table, looked up, and quietly looked at his aunt. His voice was slightly hoarse. Aunt, whose child is Xiaoxin? He could still remember that scene even when he closed his eyes. Tang Yu and Pei Chi-Chi sat together, Xiaoxin between them, and the 3 faces looked strangely harmonious. Even the manager said that they were a family. Lin Yun smiled. Of course she's my child. Lin Jinrong's face had a touch of bitterness. Really? Lin Yun could only sigh softly. Actually, tonight was a hint. If Jinrong was smart, he shouldn't fall for it anymore. Nothing would happen between him and Pei Chi-Chi. Tang Yu quickly walked through his car with Xiaoxin in his arms, opened the back door, and handed Xiaoxin to Pei Chi-Chi. Sit in the back and hold her vertically. Call me if there's a problem. Pei Chi-Chi pursed her lips and nodded. Before he closed the car door, Xiaoxin's big watery eyes kept staring at him out of fear, and so did Pei Chi-Chi. His heart warmed, and he couldn't help but reach out to pinch Xiaoxin's soft little face, and then touched Pei Chi-Chi's. His voice was extremely hoarse. It's okay. Although he said that, he drove very fast, and the black sports car penetrated through the city's reinforced concrete, speeding through the neon lights. although he was anxious, his heart was warm. His wife and son were sitting in the back of his car. What he had always longed for, what he had dreamt of enchanting. The word enchanting was a typo, I forgot how to write it. Soon, the car stopped in front of the outpatient department of Xingyuan Hospital. On the way there, he contacted an expert in the digestive system. When his car arrived, so did the expert. Xiaoxin probably knew what she had eaten and refused to get out of the car with tears in her eyes. Tang Yu carefully took her out of Pei Chi-Chi's arms and reached out to wipe away the tears of the fat little thing. He said in a low voice, "Baby, you have to be careful when you eat in the future, okay?" Little Xiaoxin nodded obediently, her little body snuggling into Tang Yu's embrace, her little hands hugging his neck, her face buried in his warm neck. Pei Chi-Chi was a little envious as she watched. Their relationship was really good. Tang Yu carefully walked into the medical building, and she hurriedly followed. The chief specialist examined him very carefully and asked if he had any stomachache. Little Xiaoxin whispered. The baby ate the cake and felt very comfortable. Tang Yu and Pei Chi-Chi didn't know whether to laugh or cry. The doctor smiled and looked up. It shouldn't be a big problem. As long as it doesn't get stuck in the respiratory tract and enters the stomach, the ring shouldn't be too big, and it should be discharged tomorrow. His voice was neither fast nor slow. I've always had those thoughts about her. He lowered his head and nibbled on her fair shoulder. At the same time, her t-shirt slid down her shoulders and piled on her waist. Because of the cold, she arched her delicate body and curled up. He took the opportunity to move forward, and her body was pressed tightly in front of the mirror. The front was cold, and the back was his hot male body. One hot and one cold, and it was like a torment in her heart. Chapter 839. She tried her best to keep her voice steady so that he wouldn't notice anything wrong with her. At this moment, she regretted it. She was like a lamb walking into a tiger's den. Tang Yu's face was close to hers, and his voice was as deep as the night. What about you? Pei Chi-Chi, do you have feelings for your brother now? His large palm was teasing her. Pei Chi-Chi froze, and her body struggled violently. She said with a suppressed voice, Tang Yu, do you have any shame? She gasped and closed her eyes tightly, unable to believe what he was doing to her. She was his sister. Chi-Chi, you have feelings. As he was doing such a shameful thing to her, he pinched her little chin and forced her to look at herself in the mirror. Do you see? Even if you are my brother, you still have a reaction under my palm. Pei Chi-Chi closed her eyes slightly, unwilling to look at the woman in the mirror. She was unwilling to admit that the woman whose face was flushed red and whose eyes were brimming with tears was herself. She didn't care if he was her brother or not. It was because she hated him, but she couldn't resist his teasing. She hated herself. She closed her eyes and shook her head desperately. Let go of me. Tang Yu. I am your sister. I don't care. He continued to torture her, and his dark eyes were locked on her in the mirror. His body was extremely tense. He had endured for a long time, and at this moment, he was in unbearable pain. Pei Chi-Chi was held in his arms, and her body was as soft as water. He knew all her weaknesses. Her eyes opened slightly, and she looked at the man in the mirror. Don't care. Pei Chi-Chi's face gradually became cold, like a cold fragrance in winter. Tang Yu, do you dare to want me? Her voice was soft. While Tang Yu was in a daze, she had already turned around, and her little hand was on his shoulder. She looked up at his depressed face. His Adam's apple kept moving, and his body instantly tensed under her fingertips. Pei Chi-Chi tiptoed, and her little mouth reached his neck, kissing his Adam's apple. Her voice was especially hoarse. Do you dare to take your sister? Tang Yu narrowed his eyes as he held on to her waist, almost breaking her in half. His breathing became hotter and hotter, as if he was breathing fire. If you feel guilty, then don't pester me. She bit his neck mischievously, just like in the past. However, Tang Yu clearly felt that she was different. His chi-chi had been corrupted by old Kansas. When had she ever been such a shy and charming little thing? When had she ever been so bold? Tang Yu was in a dilemma. Should he take her or let her go? His large hand held hers tightly, and her eyes were filled with provocation, dazzling to the point of dazzling. Covering her eyes with one hand, he lowered his head and kissed her lips. At the same time, he carried her to the sink. He kissed her greedily, holding her little face so that she could not escape. The kiss became deeper and deeper. This kiss was filled with his dominance and her despair. It was so deep, so deep. Her body was pressed against the hard mirror behind her. Her clothes were disheveled, and she looked very unbearable. Suddenly, she pushed him away forcefully. Her breathing was messy, and her little mouth was slightly swollen from the kiss. Her eyes were watery, and she looked the most beautiful and seductive. Her little hand moved to the back. Tang Yu was stunned. He did not expect her to do this. Chapter 840. She even kicked off her skirt and just sat there like that. Compared to before, she was thinner, but some parts seemed to be fuller. Tang Yu's Adam's apple kept rolling sexily. He really wanted to press her down and have sex with her, but what did she call him? She called him brother. The nickname in the past was so ironic and unsurpassable at this moment. The veins on his forehead were bulging, and his voice was tense. Put on your clothes. Pei Chi-Chi was unmoved and continued to sneer. Tang Yu, will it be all right if I put on my clothes? Will you stop pestering me then? Pestering. She used the word pestering. There was a hint of bitterness at the corner of his mouth, and his body also retreated a little dispiritedly. Slowly, he said with difficulty, Chi-Chi, wait for me for 2 years. He was already doing what he had to do. He really couldn't take the risk, so he would rather not give her hope for the time being. Perhaps, he was wrong. He really shouldn't pester her like this and make her feel troubled. But he was so afraid that she would be together with Jinrong. Jinrong, Qin Anlin, and maybe more in the future. His little one was so beautiful, how could he not worry? But now, in her heart, he was already a shameless man. On the one hand, he was engaged to Shun Lian, and on the other hand, he was pestering her. His fingers wanted to touch her. When he touched her cheek, Pei Chi-Chi waved his hand away. Her body was pressed against the glass behind her, and her eyes were filled with despair as she looked at him. Don't touch me. She laughed softly, and tears flowed down her cheeks. Tang Yu, you're the one who gave up. You're the one who didn't want me or our child. Her hand was flat against his chest, and she looked a little absent-minded. Do you know what it means to have a dead heart and to live without seeing the sun? Her eyes were as sad as the day she found out about her identity. I thought that I had lost everything, but I still had you. You also said, Pei Chi-Chi, you still had me. But in the end, I had nothing. Her voice was very soft, very slow. I don't have any family, I don't have a child, my husband has become my brother, someone else's fiancé. Now you want me to wait for you. Tang Yu, what should I wait for you? When you abort the child in my belly one more time. The last few words were uttered in a heartbreaking manner. Her face and eyes were filled with tears. She seemed to have gone mad. Why did you appear in front of me? Why did you tear open my wound? It wasn't easy for me to forget. Tears blurred her vision and made her look miserable, but she didn't care. If you pester me again and kiss me again, I will immediately agree to Jinrong's proposal. She looked at him and said word by word, not avoiding his gaze at all. Tang Yu's body stiffened. He looked at her little face and pursed his thin lips. Believe me, I'll do it. She looked fearlessly into his eyes, stubbornly meeting his gaze. The wound was torn open right after they kissed. He closed his eyes and softly spat out a few words. It doesn't hurt, so I don't love anymore. Chi-chi, right? She couldn't understand what he meant, and she didn't want to understand. At this moment, she just wanted to escape from his side, because she couldn't bear to be hurt again. Chapter 841. His voice was bitter. I won't let you get pregnant again. Chi-chi, you won't have any more children. We won't have any more children, I won't put you in danger again. Never again. Tang Yu, this person and this heart will always be yours. No matter how hard it is, I will let you live well and live happily. However, I will never be able to see you in someone else's arms. Perhaps I'm stingy because I've said that Tang Yu belongs to Pei Chi-chi, and Pei Chi-chi must also belong to Tang Yu. His heart was as cold as water, but he still picked up her clothes and held her hand. Put on your clothes. I'll put them on myself. Her voice was still cold. Tang Yu paused for a moment and let go of her. He looked at her deeply and walked out of the room. She walked out after getting dressed. Tang Yu was sitting by the bed, guarding Xiaoxin. He looked at her indifferently. If you want to go back, I'll ask old Xiao to send you. Pei Chi-chi found a single-seater sofa and sat down. I'll wait for dawn before leaving. Although she did not explain, Tang Yu knew that she was worried about Xiaoxin. He did not say anything more and reached out to cover Xiaoxin with the quilt. The lights were dimmed. It was late at night, and it was quiet. Pei Chi-chi was very awake at first, but she slowly relaxed and felt sleepy. Her eyelids closed gently. The sofa was not a bed, so she could not sleep well and kept moving around. The night was getting darker and darker. A pair of big hands carried her and gently placed her on the soft bed. Then, a chubby little thing nestled in her arms. Its little mouth habitually searched for a place and its little paw rested on her shoulder. That feeling was very warm. Pei Chi-chi did not wake up. She did not want to wake up. In her dream, a pair of black eyes kept looking at her. It was very, very gentle. The first ray of sunlight shone into the pink ward. Pei Chi-chi felt that it was a little dazzling. She shivered uncomfortably and opened her eyes. There was no one around her. She lay quietly for a while and sat up. She looked down at her clothes, wear it properly. She thought that Tang Yu and Xiaoxin had left and was about to get off the bed when she heard Xiaoxin's soft voice. Brother, have you found them? Pei Chi-chi's heart skipped a beat. She put on her shoes and went to open the bathroom door. Tang Yu was wearing a mask, and so was Xiaoxin. The two of them were squatting in front of a small basin, which contained the steak and cake that Xiaoxin had eaten last night. It was just that it didn't smell as good as before. Laughs immorally, Tang Yu was wearing gloves and holding a small stick in his hand. He was trying hard to find something. Little Axian squatted at the side and watched. Pei Chi-chi coughed. Take your time. Wait. Tang Yu's voice was soft as he picked up a diamond ring. He picked it up and looked at the indescribable small object. His voice was calm as he said, 30-carat American pink diamond, worth about 300 million. He tilted his head to look at her. Are you tempted? Pei Chi-chi did not know what to say. She pursed her lips. Give it back to Jinrong. Since Xiaoxin was fine, it was time for her to leave. At this moment, Xiaoxin looked at Tang Yu. This is Xiaoxin's poop. It's Xiaoxin's. I'll buy it for you next time. Tang Yu wanted to rub her hair but stopped himself when he thought of his clothes. Chapter 842. Tang Yu really couldn't bear to see her dressed like this, especially in the same car. He couldn't wait to take a bath with Xiaoxin and wash herself clean. Pei Chi stood at the door for a while and guessed what he was thinking. She didn't bring her bag, so she could only take out 200 yuan notes to hail a taxi. Tang Yu didn't stop her. After she left, he immediately asked the nurse to clean the toilet bowl, and then he took Xiaoxin to take a bath. There was a big bathtub with a small bed inside. The plump little fellow was lying on the small bed, happily swaying back and forth, covered in foam. Tang Yu rinsed the ring and looked at it for a long time before putting it away. He stepped into the bathtub, stretched his body, and let out a long sigh of relief when he thought of Pei Chi. Hee. The little fellow crawled over and climbed on his shoulder. Her little hands grabbed his short black hair, and she was playing very happily. Tang Yu smiled, pulled the little fellow down, and placed her on his chest, letting her sit and play. He looked at Xiaoxin's delicate little face, and pondered. Xiaoxin looked more like him, so Chi didn't suspect anything. However, if Shen Zhongshan started to take action, how long could Xiaoxin's identity be hidden from her? Hee. Xiaoxin giggled, and her little white teeth were especially cute. She was raised very well and chubby, but no one knew that she was born prematurely. In the beginning, she was as fragile as a kitten, and he was afraid that he wouldn't be able to raise her, and he was afraid that she would inherit that disease. Fortunately, Xiaoxin was getting healthier day by day. Tang Yu reached out to pinch Xiaoxin's little face, and his heart skipped a beat. Xin, call daddy. Hee. Call daddy. Hee. Xiaoxin was very determined. Tang Yu smiled, and didn't insist anymore. After bathing together, he wrapped the little fellow in a small bath towel and carried her to the room. Someone had already prepared the little princess's dress and pretty little leather shoes. Tang Yu only had a bath towel around his waist, and he helped Xiaoxin put on her clothes before cleaning himself up. Then, he drove Xiaoxin to Lin Yun's place for breakfast. Xiaoxin ate on her brother's lap, which made Xiao Yan very eager. You're a boy. Lin Yun blushed and sighed in her heart. Tang Yu also felt bitter in his heart. She was clearly his daughter, but he couldn't acknowledge her and could only care for her like this. When he was about to leave for the company, Lin Yun followed him. Tang Yu, how is Chi? Tang Yu placed his finger on the car door, lowered his eyes and smiled. She's going back first. Lin Yun nodded and didn't say anything else. Tang Yu got in the car and the black limousine quickly left the villa. Before going to Xingyuan, he went to the Lin Corporation's headquarters. As Tang Yu walked, Lin Jinrong's secretary followed him. Mr. Tang, the CEO is in a conference. Tang Yu stopped in his tracks, his expression indifferent. Then you'd better call him now to stop. The secretary was stunned. Tang Yu had already opened the door to the CEO's office. Lin Jinrong was indeed in a conference, and his secretary wanted to say something, but stopped because he couldn't afford to offend any of them. Lin Jinrong quickly said a few words in French to end the conference, and then ordered indifferently, "Make 2 cups of coffee." Chapter 843. Lin Jinrong looked at Tang Yu and gestured for him to sit down. He then smiled. I heard from my aunt that Xiaoxin is fine. Yes. Tang Yu walked over and threw something in front of Lin Jinrong. This is for you. I found it in Xiaoxin. I thought you might need it. Lin Jinrong stared at the pink diamond. It should be filled with the smell of Xiaoxin. After a long time, he smiled softly. I can still afford a ring. The corner of Tang Yu's mouth twitched. He sat down on the sofa and held his forehead with his slender fingers. His voice was a little tired. Jinrong, you and her won't end well. Give up. What about you? Lin Jinrong sat with his fingers folded into the shape of a pyramid. Brother Tang Yu, what's the result between you and her? Or, what plans do you have for her? Can you tell me? Tang Yu hooked his lips and said lightly, we got together last night. Lin Jinrong's expression changed. He looked straight at Tang Yu and then said word by word, I heard that Chi-Chi is Tang Ziyuan's child. Jinrong, I believe that with your intelligence, you can already guess whose child Xiaoxin is. Why are you constrained by Pei Chi-Chi's background? Tang Yu lowered his eyes. Even if she is my sister, I will not give up. If it wasn't an accident, even if she was his sister, he would still want their child. Jinrong, Chi-Chi is very important to me, but you are also very important to me, Tang Yu said lightly and then got up to leave. Lin Jinrong sat there. From his fingertips to the soles of his feet, he felt cold. He sat there in a daze and closed his eyes. Sure enough, it was just as he thought. However, he was the fool, and the fool was Chi-Chi. He thought he had another chance, while Chi-Chi thought that Tang Yu didn't love her that much. His secretary came in with coffee and was surprised to find that Tang Yu had left. Lin Jinrong's voice was very calm. Linda, cancel all the itineraries for today. How ridiculous. Yesterday, he had proposed to her in high spirits, but today, he had already guessed what he was thinking. Originally, he had a lot of achievements in his heart, and he felt that he didn't care. He even thought that he could compete with Tang Yu. But now, he still hesitated. Tang Yu went downstairs and sat in the car. After pondering for a while, he picked up his phone and opened QQ. He logged into Chu Shibei's alternate account and sent a message to Pei Xiaohua. Did you have a good night? It took 5 minutes for the other side to reply. First, he sent an emoji wiping sweat, followed by a string of words, you will never imagine what I went through last night. Tell me about it. I was almost proposed to by the boy I used to like. There was a picture of a girl's heart at the end. Tang Yu frowned and quickly replied, are you going to agree? No. Pei Xiaohua replied quickly. Of course not. Then, are you moved? It took 5 minutes for the other side to reply. The content of the reply made Tang Yu's heart jump. If I hadn't been married, would have said yes. Tang Yu frowned and threw the phone aside. But after a while, he picked it up again. He frowned and thought for a long time before sending it over again. You were married? Yes. Pei Xiaohua sent an emoji. My ex-husband was very handsome, but also a jerk. He ran away with another woman. Handsome, but also a jerk. Tang Yu was speechless. Look, the enthusiasm of the female fans is very high. So, the new magazine will use the previous issue's character. I heard that Marvel's new product launch is going to be held soon. Little Pei, you can't be disappointed. You have to get this exclusive. The chief editor was astute. It's okay to take a few photos. The main thing is the interview. Now, the readers have a big appetite. If we can give them a copy of the special VCD recording, it will definitely sell out. Pei Chi-Chi couldn't help but say, Chief Editor, what's the difference between this and Consuming Men? The chief editor's eyes widened. We don't need you to sell it, nor do we need me to sell it. Fine. Chapter 845. The managing editor immediately changed his expression and smiled. Xiao Pei, I can see that you're an all-rounder. How about this, I'll assign 3 or 4 people to you. You're familiar with Amy and the rest. Don't feel pressured. We'll have a double issue with Jia Ren. As he spoke, he stood up and walked to her side. He patted her on the shoulder and said earnestly, betting a new magazine on a newcomer. This shows that the higher-ups value you. Little pay, work hard. Who knows, maybe this office will be yours when I return to H City in the future. Pei Chi was speechless and resisted weakly. Managing editor, I don't have any lofty ideals. I just want to eat and drink with my mentor. Silly girl, don't talk nonsense. The managing editor turned into a kind elder and patted her again. Work hard. I have high hopes for you. Pei Chi looked at him with resentment in her eyes. She felt very uncomfortable when she came out of the office. Old Ken looked at her as if he was about to explode. What's wrong? Old Ken leaned against the wall and looked at his beloved little disciple. Pei Chi leaned against the wall opposite him and imitated Old Ken by stretching her legs against the opposite wall. Old Ken could be tall, but her legs were only half the size of his, so naturally, she couldn't. She pursed her lips and said, the managing editor said that the higher-ups are going to start a new magazine, mainly aimed at female consumers, with elite men in various industries as models. Old Ken smiled, revealing his white teeth. That's pretty good. Actually, Jia Ren has been going downhill all these years. If we don't reform it, it'll really have nothing to eat. In the past, the sponsors were all big names. Look at now, even Tom, Dick, and Harry can be on it. Pei Chi looked up. Old Ken, I'm serious. I don't want to get it wrong. Are you afraid that your ability is limited? Old Ken smiled. No. Her voice was a little weak. It's not like that. Pei Chi looked up at the small window above her and said softly, I just feel that life in City H is more suitable for me. Perhaps returning to City B was a mistake. She shouldn't have come back. Lao Ken stared at her for a long time and said in a hoarse voice, Are you backing down again? She pressed the cigarette butt. Isn't it just a matter of sleeping with a man or not? Sleep with him again. If you think that's it, then you should let him go. If you still want to sleep with him and don't want him to sleep with someone else, then you can't let him go. Pei Chi glared at him. Old T said, his words are crude, but his logic is not. But what if he's a blood brother? Pei Chi looked at Lao Ken and asked faintly. Old Ken was stumped by the question. When he came back to his senses, Pei Chi was already far away. Pei Chi returned to her desk and stared blankly at the pile of things. She simply wanted to pack them up and leave immediately, but she couldn't bear to part with Amy, Lao Ken, and even the cunning chief editor. Sighing, he accepted his fate. The little man on the computer popped up again. It was Chu Shibei. Why haven't you spoken for a long time? Pei Chi typed a string of words slowly. Xiao Beibei, the chief editor wants me to sell myself to men. If I lose my job, can you take care of me? The other side replied with an emoticon and said, sure. Then, he added a few more words. I'll definitely take care of you until you're fair and fat. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.